Having worked as a nurse for over a decade, I've seen my fair share of strange and unexplained occurrences in my line of work, but have always been a skeptic, dismissing these stories as superstition and exaggeration. However, my viewpoint was put to the test when I was called to investigate an odd incident at the hospital where I worked. The hospital where I work is a semi-new building. It is around 30 years old, but it was built on the site of a previous building which had housed the psych hospital for decades prior. The old building holds a dark history, with many successful suicides happening within its walls many years ago. Even though our building is newer, it hasn't been immune to death either, with a few medical deaths happening over the years. My coworkers swear that the hospital is haunted by the spirits of the past, and I can't help but feel a sense of unease whenever I'm working the night shift. It's a constant reminder of the tragedy that has occurred here. It was a night shift like any other, or so I thought. I was working charge and the silence of the night was only broken by the occasional beep of a machine. But that all changed when my coworker called me from the pediatric unit in the basement, her voice shaking with fear. She asked me to come down and look at something, and I could sense the urgency in her voice. I quickly made my way to the basement, my heart racing with anticipation. The dimly lit corridors of the basement seemed even more foreboding than usual, and I could feel a sense of unease creeping up on me. As I reached the pediatric unit, I could see that my coworker was visibly shaken, and she wouldn't speak. Security showed up too, and even he seemed a bit freaked out, which I found strange because he's not an easily rattled guy. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was very wrong. They led me to a patient room that was closed for construction, the door firmly locked. It was impossible to open it without a key. Now the door had been locked all night, and staff had been in and out of the hallway constantly all night. Nobody had unlocked it. Then they showed me a single frame from the security footage, a glimpse of what had happened earlier that night. I couldn't see the whole thing for security reasons, but the image was clear enough to send shivers down my spine. In the footage, you can clearly see the doors open, and the head and shoulders of a young black boy with short hair, lying on the floor in the open doorway. The boy was lying in an awkward position, as if he had fallen, and it was clear that he was not moving. According to the security guy, this young boy was visible for a few minutes on the security footage, and then it was gone. Obviously, this could have been a prank, and I only saw one screenshot, but my coworkers were pretty riled up about it. They were convinced that something supernatural had occurred and were visibly shaken by the experience. I, on the other hand, don't believe in ghosts, but if their story is true, I don't have an explanation. Next day, when this was shown to the other nurses, we learned that one of the patients who had recently stayed in the room before it was closed for repair was a young man who tragically committed suicide not too long after discharge. The thought of him potentially still lingering in that room added to the eerie and haunted feel of the place. I couldn't help but wonder if the ghostly figure in the security footage was a manifestation of the young man's tragic end. I'm a former certified nursing assistant and worked at a nursing home, the night shift. I had a coworker who said she was a Wiccan. Not too far-fetched, but she also claimed to see demons at our nursing home. I didn't believe that, but there had already been a few freaky things that happened in our center. Knocking on the door, setting off the outdoor motion detectors with no one on the camera monitor, that kind of thing. I'm still not sure ghosts are real, but whenever I think back to this experience, I'm in disbelief about what actually happened. I was on duty alone one night. The darkness of the unit enveloped me as I sat alone on duty. My only companion, the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. It was a peaceful enough night until I began to hear the sound of footsteps, followed by the electric whir of a room door opening. All of the doors were all handicap accessible. Our nurse's station was a semicircle completely windowed, so I could look around pretty easily and see about half of the residents' rooms and the living room. No one was there, so I went out and individually checked on each resident to see if they got up out of bed, but all of them were asleep, undisturbed. So I went back to the nurse's station. Everything was fine for the next few minutes, but then all of a sudden, the sound of footsteps were back, growing louder and distant. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, and I found myself checking on the residents once more, just to be sure. But still, nothing seemed out of place. Confused, I returned to my station, feeling increasingly anxious. I decided to video call a friend in Australia, desperate for some kind of human connection. As I waited for the call to connect, the sounds came back and started to grow louder. I was almost in tears because the sound was so clear. Just as my friend picked up the call, I heard a loud pounding on the glass, and I turned to see one of the residents staring at me through the window. I let out a startled cry as she glared at me, her face twisted in anger. She pounded her hand on the glass. I quickly hung up the call and rushed out to help her. The resident was a stroke survivor, her speech reduced to a jumble of incomprehensible gibberish. I tried to ask her what she needed, but she only grew more agitated. Her frustration and anger became almost palpable. I finally managed to guide her back to her room, where I administered her medication as it was right around the time for it anyways. The resident moved into the nursing home 4 months back. Her non-Alzheimer's husband lived with her in the same room. She often forgot who he was, and indeed it was very sad. The week before this, he tragically died in the hospital. Seeing that she fell into a deep sleep, I came back to the station. About 30 minutes later, the sound of footsteps returned. Faint, but noticeable. It scared the daylights out of me. I froze, and while I was gathering courage to get up and look out of the window, I was startled by a piercing scream. The resident bolted out of her room screaming. She exclaimed that there was a man at the end of her bed, saying that he was dead and he has come to take her with him. I rushed to her side, trying to calm her down. I assured her that there was no one there and that she was safe. She was visibly shaken and in distress. I held her hand and sat with her, talking to her softly and trying to soothe her. As she slowly calmed down, I helped her back to her bed, gave her a glass of water, and stayed with her until she fell asleep. I came back to the nurse's station. A few hours later, the next shift, the morning shift girl arrived. I told her what had happened earlier and asked her to check on the resident while I prepared to leave for home. However, as soon as I reached my car, my phone rang and it was the hospital calling. Confused, I answered and was informed that the resident had passed away. I sat in my car and cried, wondering if what she had seen was real, and if it was her deceased husband who had come back for her. This is a story from the time I was a CNA at a nursing home in a small Texas town. Now, in the nursing home there were 2 wings which are connected by a hallway. Compared to the front wing, the back was always a bit heavy with gloom, maybe even spooky at times. Not sure how to explain it, but there was certainly a darker atmosphere. For this reason, the nurses disliked staying in the back. So after the residents were in bed, and the night's last rounds were completed, we would migrate to the front nurses' station. This nightly trek went on for a while, until the administration learned of it, and for liability reasons, instructed the backwing nurses to stay in their assigned place of duty. there were always ghostly happenings. Nonetheless, these incidents were mostly shrugged off as the imagination of tired and overworked employees. But there was one incident in particular that was quite terrifying and witnessed by several people. One resident, Mr. Gomez, was rumored to have been into witchcraft throughout his life. Late at night, Mr. Gomez, according to reports from other residents, would creep into their rooms. Like a serpent born of hell, he would slither on his stomach, his arms at his sides. His eyes would be rolled back in his head, his tongue darting in and out of his mouth, flicking the air like a human snake. He would crawl under their beds and try to push them off.
"He's evil. He's the devil,"
the other residents would claim. But the reports weren't taken very seriously. After all, these old folks were half out of their minds. And realistically, how could feeble old Mr. Gomez, who needed the assistance of nurses just to get out of bed, be physically capable of such actions? The nurses all agreed that the reports were just imagined stories of old, confused people. That is, until the terrifying night that all of us became believers of the evil that lived within Mr. Gomez. It was well past midnight. The residents were sleeping. The halls were quiet. The nurses had gathered in the back lobby to sit and wait for morning. Most of us were at the point of dozing off when a loud gasp broke the silence. One of the nurses stood up, and a frightful expression upon her face. She pointed down the hall towards the residents' rooms. As the others turned to look, a horrifying scene unfolded. It was Mr. Gomez, slithering on his stomach, making his way down the hall and into the room of a slumbering woman. We just stood there, petrified, unsure of what to do. Mr. Gomez was now crawling through the hallway, heading right towards the lobby, and the fear struck us. The stories were true. Mr. Gomez was slithering like a snake. His eyes, indeed, were rolled back, and his tongue flicking in and out like a cursed beast. We watched as he snicked through the lobby furniture, crawling between chair legs and hissing at all of us. We ran up the hallway to the front desk. The doors to the back wing slammed shut as the last one passed through. We stayed up front for the next few hours, and as the sun began to peek over the horizon, we gathered enough courage to check on the back wing. Everything was quiet, and Mr. Gomez was once again sleeping soundly in his bed. A few nights later, Mr. Gomez unfortunately passed away. As I and my colleague were attending to his body, several loud thumps were heard against the window. My colleague opened the drapes to find nothing there. The rumors of Mr. Gomez's dark practices were now firmly believed by the staff, and we couldn't shake off the feeling that his spirit still lingered within the aged care home.